How the pandemic has made us less human. In a profound and beautifully written essay, Mary Harrington says COVID has gnawed away social bonds, creating an impersonal and soulless new normal that must be rejected. Reflecting on that year of COVID is like trying to grasp the layout of someone's house by peering through the keyhole. It's difficult to get any sense of perspective when we're all confined in our homes, with only algorithmically filtered online news feeds. Here's looking at you, Facebook and Twitter, to supply information about the outside world. The temptation is to allow every perspective to fall away, save the most personal experiences and the most general public conversation. It would be easy enough to write a review of the past year from the personal perspective, all the hedgerows of emotion. It would be as easy to write a breezy roundup of the year's public conversations, which have been loud, to say the least, and increasingly surreal. But there's another story of the pandemic's impact that's far harder to see in either of those frameworks. This has been the deliberate shattering, in the name of virus control, of what was left of our common life. Between individual experiences and those on the bigger scale of national or international politics lies most of human society. Clubs, church groups, voluntary associations, the whole organic life of communities, great and small. All of this relies on peer-to-peer social connection, and it was all abruptly halted by the lockdown. When the pandemic struck, there was a rash of hopeful articles about how this crisis might strengthen civil society bonds and make us more aware of how interdependent we are as a society. This all happened to an extent. I'll just step in briefly and say that's true. In the beginning, for the first few weeks, I think there was that sense of togetherness, that sense of thankfulness for individuals who were keeping the economy going, and a realization of who was to blame for the China virus. What country should have been held accountable for all the death they unleashed on the world? Those two things were going on, kind of this civic nationalism in a way, I guess, if you want to call it that, where we all kind of came together and realized something unique, but let's come together. Let's be thankful for our first responders, all the people out there who were working on the front lines, and placing blame where it belonged. And then politics happened, because winning an election in 2020 was more important to some individuals and certain aspects of our country than keeping the focus where it belonged, keeping the focus on who was responsible for most of the loss of life. Interesting how you don't hear much about that anymore. It's kind of gone the opposite way. All the while that country's sitting there laughing at us. Don't really hear too many individuals thankful anymore for first responders. Then again, I guess we don't see too many dancing nurse TikTok videos anymore, which is a good thing. Mutual aid organizations sprang up, often with faith communities at the forefront, seeking to plug gaps and help bring to those struggling under the lockdown. There were waves of volunteers to help the NHS deliver vaccines and pick fruit. But against that newfound volunteerism, we must weigh the impact the past year has had on countless existing institutions, social settings, and relationships. For COVID has accelerated what I think of as the disintermediation of everything. In the 2000s, when the internet hit the mainstream, with the launch of Facebook, eBay, and their ilk, there was lots of chatter about the way amateurs might use the internet to route round intermediate institutions. This, the apostles of the digital revolution believed, would impel a great democratization and empowerment of smaller players. That was their theory. What it meant in practice was centralization. Think of the way Facebook replaced local newspapers, and the advertising revenue they once earned made Mark Zuckerberg one of the richest men in the world. Now, COVID rules have brought that centralization, with its many losers and tiny numbers of winners, to all of life. And that's what they talk about. The way that governments and the federal government, I guess, more locally, has allowed larger businesses to remain open, Walmarts, Amazons of the world, but made sure that mom and pop, Main Street, was crushed. I heard somebody making kind of a joke, not really trying to be funny, but just pointing out something, that I guess Walmart is a place where you can't catch the corona, but your local mom and pop shop, corona must only go in there. I get that some businesses are more essential than others in a way, and certainly groceries are a necessity. But interesting how a lot of businesses have been allowed to thrive and have seen record profits, while so many small businesses have gone by the wayside, compelled to close by pandemic policy. By June 2020, more than 11,000 small and medium-sized shops had gone out of business. One report estimates that 48 businesses closed for good every day in 2020. It's not just the high street. Another report estimates that by last September, 240,000 small and medium-sized businesses of all types went to the wall. But that didn't apply evenly to all businesses. It fell disproportionately on smaller ones. Online grocer, retailer, Ocado, I believe this individual lives in the UK, the one who penned this article, saw 35% growth over 2020, while Amazon saw 84% growth. Wherever in the world there were lockdowns, small businesses struggled and died, and the big ones got bigger. The assault extends to the voluntary sector, as donations wavered and high-end street charity shops have been forced to close. One report estimates that even charities face a wave of consolidation, with smaller, more niche bodies folding their sometimes highly specific local remits into the more general one of larger organizations. The effect is even being felt in churches. The Bishop of Manchester warned in January that COVID will accelerate the closure of yet more Anglican churches, as loss of collection income meets already dwindling congregations. To render the upkeep of ancient buildings unaffordable, reports suggest the Church of England is now proposing to increase parish sizes and cull mid-ranking clergy in order to trim costs. At an informal level, there have been many losers. The 10,000 bars, pubs, and restaurants that closed their doors for good in 2020 aren't just a business. Each closure represents friends not met, milestones not celebrated with family, stories not exchanged, troubles not shared over a pint. Don't dine out much, but that's the great point, right? That's the main thing about gatherings. It's not so much the food. Most of the time that's average to slightly above average. Not going to name any names, BJs, but the main thing is those memories, those bonds you make with people in your social circle. And here again, the centralizing trend applies. Those with happy marriages, kids, and good social lives have limped through the past year with social bubbles and Zoom calls. But anyone with strong social connections or who is reliant on social institutions for everyday human contact found even that taken from them. A quarter of UK adults have suffered loneliness and mental health issues, and I've talked about that in several videos recently. And those worst affected have been young people, single parents, and the unemployed. In other words, those with the weakest support structures. And nowhere has the shattering of life in common bitten more sharply than for those most in need of support. The past year has been tough on all children, shut off from social contact and struggling with Zoom school. But what is painfully visible is the worsening of child mental health down the socioeconomic scale, and I would put individuals who are older into that as well. Individuals that may be in nursing homes, that don't have a lot of people in their lives, or their only interactions are with staff and their other neighbors within that community or that facility. How those have probably been cut off as well due to, you gotta watch out. When you're that age, though, definitely that's true. Lockdown has also gnawed at the quality of life for elderly people. To an Alzheimer's Society survey, reported a decline in faculties as a consequence of isolation. And there are harrowing stories of the impact isolation in care homes has had on people with advanced dementia, deprived of visits from relatives. Exactly what I was talking about. Okay, as I said, I think you all get it. Leave the rest of it here up on the screen. If you want to pause that real quick, I'll zoom it in for you. Check that out. Go ahead and skip to the comments. All of the stuff you guys know, we've talked about it so many times. The brainless, uneducated anti-lockdown and vaccine brigade seem to be afflicted by a mass outbreak of paranoid delusion. I feel very sorry for them. Their weak minds have been unable to cope with a little isolation. It does seem dark at the moment, but everything is temporarily. But ultimately, citizens have the final say on how they want their society to be. The future is determined by us and what we accept and permit. If the technocrats and billionaire class get their desired way, it will be very atomized, soulless dystopian future with little freedom and permission required for everything. It is no secret. They want less of us in their playground. So make a choice. Surrender your liberties for perceived safety by their technology. For a little convenience, comply with their illogical dictates. But know that every choice you make is shaping the future we will have. They are few, we are many, and remember, it is you that holds the power to say no. Make your choice. Good point. There are really a lot of crazy people about, anti-vaxxers and COVID deniers especially. Their paranoia is hilarious, poor things. Hope you get better soon. And then somebody replied to that, my friend's husband has just died from blood clots after having the AstraZeneca jab. Your comments are disgraceful. So there it is, everybody. Hopefully that wasn't too much of a drag on your time. I know it's kind of a little bit drawn out, but I know if you're watching this video, you probably understand what I've been talking about throughout this video and throughout other videos that I've put out over the past year or so, that you have to find that balance. And it seems like a lot of the individuals in charge of certain states really didn't care about the whole mental side, the human aspect that's talked about here in this essay. And because of that, people have the struggles that they have. The question is, and what I asked when I talked about this about a week ago is, what will the long-term ramifications be for people who have been impacted by this? Will they be able to get over it, or will they just be swept under the rug, just a statistic to be forgotten about? Because, hey, we have all of these individuals suffering from mental health that's going to sit with them for the rest of their lives. But we saved a couple people's lives, or we saved tens of lives, hundreds of lives, but how many will you cost over the long run? That's always the question that I'm thinking about, and something that we will find out for sure over time. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care and be well.